I'm known as part of the one-liner brigade.
Have you got a favourite heckle?
What is this?
That's a very open-ended question.
It's too existential. It's like, where do I begin?
If there was a list of my top 10 most terrifying professions, comedy would be right up there at number 1. It must be hard, particularly at the beginning.
It's like learning a musical instrument, except you do all your practice in public. You have to have an emotional desperation to do it, or really want to do it. Loads of funny people give up. Really talented people because of the emotional damage. But it's like practicing for karate or something. If you bang your hand enough on a board, eventually it goes completely numb.
What came first in your life, comedy or Christianity?
I was born into a Christian home. We said our prayers by the side of our bed, but it usually ended in a pillow fight. I've previously described, though, growing up in a Christian home as a bit like being exposed to the antidote before you know what the poison is. You wonder why people do this stuff, and it's not until you sort of start your own journey on your own that you go, You know, sometimes you see singers interviewed and they say, I learnt to sing in the church. Well, in a way, I learnt not to do stand-up in the church, but I learnt how to stand up.
There wasn't a period of teenage rebellion, casting it all off?
I think once I cycled home from youth group without my lights on.
Ooh, you rebel.
Yeah, but perhaps it's still to come.
Welcome once again to Re-Enchanting, the show where we aim to show how our world could be re-enchanted from its post-Christian, secular view of life to perhaps something that resembles the Christian vision of reality. And we do that with all kinds of interesting guests. I'm Justin Briley, and this is Belle Tyndall. Belle, who have we got on the show today?
Today, we have Milton Jones,
Woohoo!
who probably needs no introduction. By the way, no other guest has ever had a woohoo from Justin.
Really? Wow.
I saved that for you, Milton.
We're peaking. So you probably need no introduction, but I'll give you one anyway. Milton is, of course, the award-winning stand-up comedian, broadcaster, author, and Mock the Week legend. You may have caught him on Live at the Apollo, Michael McIntyre's Comedy Roadshow, or his very own BBC Radio 4 show. Thanks a lot, Milton Jones. He is the king of the one-liners and the crafter of the 10-second sermon. So we are going to be chatting to Milton about his life, his comedy, his Christian faith, and discussing the relationship between God and laughter.
Yes, we are re-enchanting laughter on the show today. Let's hope you do produce a few laughs in the course of the show, Milton. But we always start with the same signature question as we're on top of Lambeth Palace Library. What are you currently reading?
I don't read very fast, literally, in every sense. But I normally have 2 or 3 books open. So at the moment, we've got the autobiography of Billy Connolly.
Oh, nice.
Windswept and interesting. I'm just finishing Rory Stewart's Politics on the Edge.
A guest in this season.
Yes, so I hear. Yes.
Re-Enchanting.
Yeah. And I've just started Ian McEwan's Lessons.
Oh, 3 great books.
Wow.
Nicely done.
What a cultured person you are. Do you read many other comedians' books?
It's quite rare for me to read other comedians' books. It feels like busman's holiday, frankly. And I'm either jealous of what they've done or I'm angry that it got published. So either way, same for TV really and stuff. Yeah. But actually, normally there would be a football biography in there as well.
Oh, okay.
That's sort of my escape.
Okay. What's your team then?
Arsenal.
Right. Very good. I have nothing to say because football is an area completely opaque to me. But
sure,
that's good. That's good.
Good thing.
I don't really support a team, but the closest one probably is Tottenham.
Ooh.
I know. It's a good job we're on opposite ends of the table.
Yeah. Well, it's been nice to meet you all.
Yeah. When I say support, it's very loose.
Yep.
I lived there for like 4 months, owned it, and left.
Yeah. I've done a few football shows, like Soccer AM, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I've never had such vitriolic feedback on anything.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, if you make a joke about another team, it's sort of,
right, okay.
I mean, what do you expect? But
yeah.
So we've obviously had Frank Skinner on the show in the previous season. big football fan. Does football come up frequently on the comedy circuit between different
not
comedians?
Not as frequently as you might think, because obviously Frank did a TV show that was for football fans. And I feel you lose half the audience if you do something specific about football. It has to be about someone like David Beckham or Wayne Rooney, who's broken through into culture.
Yeah, popular culture.
Whereas if you do something about football that's very specific, a lot of people won't understand it.
They'll tune out.
Yeah, I think both of us would be in that half of the
Definitely.
audience.
Right, okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
David Beckham, I know who he is. That's
Yes.
fine.
I think he's retired.
When and how did you realise that you were particularly funny, Milton?
I met someone from primary school not so long ago, sort of out in the street, and I hadn't met them since, I was 6. And they said to me, "Oh, I remember you. You had ginger hair. I had gingery hair in those days.
Yeah.
And you didn't say much, but when you did, it was quite funny." And I hadn't actually realised that my sort of joking front had gone all the way back that far. But I think because I'm an introvert by nature, I sort of have this feeling that when I do eventually say something, it should be notable.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think, and also my parents had a good sense of fun. I've one brother, we were always mucking about. It was a house of faith, yes, but a lot of jokes. So that was the culture I came from.
Yeah.
And I think there are 2 types of comedian. There's a comedian that's on all the time. Joke, which is great for about 20 minutes. But don't share a car with them, whatever you do. And then there's the more schizophrenic type, which I think I am, where I'm one person on stage, one person off stage. In fact, originally I wanted to be an actor.
Right.
And I couldn't get any work as an actor. No one else wanted me to be an actor. So I turned to stand-up so that directors and producers would have somewhere to see me.
Right.
And gradually that began to take over. I just kept doing it. And after a while I thought, well, actually, this might be better because it's just me. I get all the money. I drive myself around. I could do more than one show in a night. And at that time, fortunately, clubs were opening up.
Yeah.
Stand-up was becoming a big thing. So it ended up taking over.
You hit the wave.
Indeed, yes. I was lucky in that department.
I mean, you say that like comedy is something that's so easy. Yeah. If there was a list of my top 10, I don't know, most terrifying professions, comedy would be right up there at number 1. Like, what was it within? It must be hard, as particularly at the beginning.
Sure. And the analogy that people use is it's like learning a musical instrument, except you do all your practice in public.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So you have to have an emotional desperation to do it.
Sure.
Really want to do it.
Yeah.
And we say loads of funny people give up.
Yeah.
Really talented people because of the emotional damage. But it's like, I don't know, practicing for karate or something. If you bang your hand enough on a board, eventually it goes completely numb.
Oh, okay.
So if you do it enough and get used to failing in public, and I think it was Joe Brand or someone saying recently, that's part of the deal of becoming a stand-up. Doesn't matter what level you're at. In the next 6 months, there will be a dreadful gig.
Right.
Just will be.
Right.
And you'll be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
What's the term for when you basically completely tank on stage? Is it just like you die on stage or something?
Yeah, dying.
Yeah. So when was the last time that happened?
Well, the trouble is your bar goes up a bit.
Right.
And quite often they're at corporate events because you're paid to come in. You're one of 7 or 8 things that are happening that evening. Maybe the evening's running late. Maybe the chairman has got up and talked for half an hour and no one's listened to him.
Sure.
So you think, well, if you're not going to listen to your boss, what chance have I got? I did a gig 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was the Cardiff Retail Awards. Stuck in my mind. And just before I went on, someone said, they don't speak English, yeah? And so I went on with my English wordplay. And the sound guy thought it was funny.
Yeah.
But I was there for half an hour just talking in a big room. And
That's on, as a Welsh person, I can say that's on the Welsh. That's not on you.
Pretty much, yeah. Well,
That's their bad. Come on.
Yeah, I like to think so. But just you've got to come to terms with that, though, that you will be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And yes, there are some times that it's not your fault. And then also sometimes you self-sabotage.
Oh.
Well, you don't mean to ruin the evening for everyone. However, if something happens in the room, you have half a second to think. And the worst thing you can do with a heckle or someone interjecting is ignore it, because it looks like you don't know how to deal with it. So the best thing, take a breath and come back with something, depending. Now, over the years, I found it's best to try and engage people in conversation.
Right.
Because they've usually spent 10 minutes thinking, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this, they say it. Oh. And then you engage them in conversation, and now it's completely equal. And
they need another 10 minutes to reply.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've learned that. But to begin with, either you go in too hard and you're too aggressive and the people go, that's too much. Or you say something that's off the top of your head, and it's inappropriate, or you mention redundancy in passing and the whole room freezes and you realise, oh no, I've stumbled on something that I shouldn't have.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so you begin to slide down, you know.
Gosh.
Yeah.
This is why I would find it terrifying. It feels like a minefield that you're potentially entering when you enter that live situation.
Sure. And they say it's to do with your flight and fight responses and all that sort of thing. But the worst that can happen is that no one laughs. Now, that is bad for you. But actually, if you're a doctor or some other thing, there are a lot worse things that can happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to internalize that mentally, but and difficult to live through it. But if you do it enough and you've got another gig in 2 days' time, you're probably going to forget it.
Yeah. Have you got a favourite heckle?
Favourite heckle, I mean, sometimes people are aggressive and that doesn't bother me. I've had 2 heckles which are really difficult to deal with.
Yeah, go on.
The first one is, what is this?
Oh, yeah.
That's a very open-ended question.
It's too existential. It's like, where do I begin? You mean, why are we here? What So, I mean, I laughed and it was funny and the audience thought it was funny, but that's quite a good heckle.
You can take that in lots of different directions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the other one was, these are just words.
Oh, again.
Again.
Quite
correct.
Quite a philosophical sort of opener.
You're right.
Yeah.
Do you remember where these gigs were? Were they in Oxford by any chance? Or,
no, I've wiped that out, I'm afraid. But the words are very much there. And
yeah, I bet.
I think if I ever write a book, about comedy, what is this? Or these are just words. It would be a good joke book, wouldn't it?
It would.
What's your main style, would you say? Because I when I look around at different stand-up comedians, they tend to have a particular way of engaging.
I'm known as part of the one-liner brigade. Right. There are a number of us. And to get away with one-liners, you need to have a misdirection. Mm-hmm. Like for Tim Vine, it's showbiz. It's like, I've got these jokes and here's another one. You might not like For Jimmy Carr, it was more of a character thing, although he's sort of broken out of that now. Gary Delaney, who does one-liners, it was more, here are some jokes, you might like some of them, whereas I stick my hair up and act a character. In fact, when I started off as trying to be an actor, I think I did one-liners because I was so scared when I was on stage. I needed to get to the joke as quickly as possible.
Oh, yeah.
And if you do enough of those, that you end up with one-liners. And then you get known for that and so on. I'm known as a one-liner person now.
But quite surreal with
Yes, there's an edge to it. It wasn't until I started creating a world for this person, sticking my hair up and having a weird shirt, that was a signpost to say I'm coming from left field. That people went, I don't know, there's something about going to Romford on a Friday night to a nightclub. And if you walk on as a middle-class person, clearly from the home counties, you go, right, this bloke better be really funny. Yeah. However, if you stick your hair up
and put on a Hawaiian shirt,
he's mad. He's mad, so he's not a threat. So we just listen to what he says for another 30 seconds while we laugh at his face. So that helped me. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a costume that you put on, but it helps to kind of just engage the audience. Is there a sort of framework, a kind of set of rules that you kind of go in with when it comes to the one-liner kind of approach to comedy?
I don't know about rules, because I think most comedians do what works.
Yeah.
And interestingly, or perhaps not interestingly, we're not directed.
Mm.
We just tend to go down the route of least resistance.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing about when you become a bit more successful is people want more of similar, but not the same. So you've always got to write, but you're writing within a genre that you've become known for. And one of my problems is wanting to get out of that sometimes. And the new show is going to have longer jokes.
Ah.
There will be one-liners in it, but there will be like whole paragraphs of speaking first sometimes. What I've learned with that so far is it better be really funny when you get to the end, because, we've waited. Because at least you can throw in a few less good jokes, if they're quick.
Yes.
So in terms of rules and stuff, most comedians go around life reverse engineering words, experiences. So that's funny. How can I make it funnier?
Right.
Exaggerating. For me, it's getting it down to I'll stare at a word like Irish. I'll stare at that word, Irish, Irish, Irish. Play it around almost like a crossword clue. The word iris is in it already.
Right.
How could I turn that round so that it made... So I play with it. And sometimes I have an idea for 7 or 8 years on my computer going, there's something in there. I know there's something in it. I know there's something in it. And then maybe when people actually start to pay for tickets of a new tour, I go, I need to make something of this now. And is it my aunt? Is my aunt called Iris? Is she Irish? And in the end, it turns out to be my aunt is almost Irish. Her name's Iris.
Okay.
And it works like that.
Yeah.
It's almost as if I've meditated so much on it.
Okay.
I get it down to 7 words.
Wow. Yeah.
And then you try it out, and that works. Unfortunately, with one-liners, that only fills 10 seconds.
Yeah, of course. And it might have been 8 years of work that went into it.
Absolutely. And in a show of an hour and 10 minutes, say, I've got to 200 to 250 one-liners. So I need a lot of those.
Yeah.
Hopefully the laughs are long.
Yes.
So I've made a rod for my own back in the sense of I need a lot of one-liners. But if I go onto radio or TV and I've only got 30 seconds, I could do 3.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's handy. But things like Mock the Week,
Yeah.
that was great because straight up to the microphone, bang, 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 bang.
Yeah.
But then I burnt all that stuff.
Oh, did you?
Well, like I couldn't really use it again.
Sure, yeah, too big of a platform.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So not for a while anyway.
Think of another name that's nearly
yeah,
Irish.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't work so well as Wales. Yeah.
And can I just confirm that when those comedians on that show, which sadly is no longer airing, but go up to that mic, they have planned all those jokes in advance, right?
I always say Mock the Week was like a syllabus. Well, you got a sort of massive wad of paper beforehand,
right,
of all the possible things that could happen, and you hoped that what you'd revised came up. Yes,
in the exam.
And I mean, obviously, it depended what was in the news to some extent.
Right.
What came up, and basically anything that didn't involve certain death was going to come up.
Okay.
So you could work it out, but the biggest problem with the scenes at the end was that there were 6 of us, and the first 2 or 3 people would cover it often. So you better come up with increasingly obscure stuff to get away with it. And you could feel, even if a subject came up, there was something about people stealing Monopoly sets, I remember came up once, and you could feel everyone going for the same joke, which was, did he get out of jail free card?
Right.
But you could feel everyone home and in on it, and someone got it out. So there were lots of things like that that you were effectively in competition. And I think most of what I said on Mock the Week was, which wasn't always in the show.
No.
But it was just the frustration.
Yes.
I mean, I was lucky in that sense that my style was slightly different.
Yeah.
And, someone would say number 1 thing, and someone would say number 2 thing, and someone would say number 3 thing, and I would say pheasant. And that would be the end of the round.
And that would be fine. That's Milton.
Yeah. And the editor used to like it because it was a point to go, right, well, we can't do anything else, so let's move on.
Sure.
So it worked for me, even though I'm not really a political or a topical person.
Can you enjoy other people's comedy, or do you find yourself like trying to work out the inner workings of what they've done and how they've done it.
Yes, it's like any business. If you're involved in a business, you know what it's like from the inside, and you go,
ruins it.
and quite often you go, but I was working on a thing and you've nailed it. Oh, fair enough. Quite often Tim Vine and I phone each other up and say, have you got a bit about... yeah.
Just so you don't happen to both tread the same territory kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Or also, if you listen to a lot of comedy, it's quite hard to tell. Sometimes an idea comes to you quite easily. It's probably the same with writing and stuff. Okay,
Yeah.
did I think of that? Or is,
or is that lodged in there from someone else?
Yeah, so it's good to check around. And there's a lot, people do nick stuff as well. So it's good to check around and to be seen to check around.
Right, okay.
When you have a new show or a new joke, or because sometimes it does form fully made into your brain. You think, there's a problem. And then you realise that you wrote it years ago. No, I'm just repeating myself.
Have you got at the risk of just asking you your favourite of everything, I'm just so intrigued because some of your one-liner quips are so iconic, but do you have one that you're really proud of?
Apart from the Irish joke.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, that's just random. I mean, I think you're always working on the things you're working on at the moment,
where
you got to laugh for the first time last time.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think what that was. I think maybe it was when you get home tonight, ladies and gentlemen, give your relatives a hug because it makes it harder for them to punch you. That got a laugh last time. So good, right?
Good,
that's in the show.
Yeah, okay.
So it's a nice thing to end on for everyone.
Yeah.
But there were certain iconic jokes. One of the earliest that sort of when people, he's the guy with that joke.
Right.
Was my Auntie Marge has been ill for so long, we've changed her name to I can't believe she's not better. And, people, you were the Auntie Marge guy. Yeah. So that was like 25 years ago.
Right. It still works. I can't believe it's not butter. I don't know if they even sell that anymore, but I still recognise that joke, that line.
Yes.
Very good. What came first in your life, comedy or Christianity?
Well, in terms of knowing about it, I was born into a Christian home, and my parents went to church, and the idea of God was very much in our heads. But as I said, it was a happy home. It was full of laughing and stuff. And yes, we said our prayers by the side of our bed, but it usually ended in a pillow fight.
Right.
So it wasn't a strict, nasty upbringing. I've previously described, though, growing up in a Christian home as a bit like being exposed to the antidote before you know what the poison is.
Oh, that's good.
That you wonder why all these things, people do this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not until you sort of start your own journey on your own that you go, yeah, maybe. Or even when you have kids, you just think, well, what am I passing on to them? And we all come to a place, don't we? We have to say, well, what am I going to do about this or not? And I did that. And I found that my life began to take off in other ways as a result of that.
There wasn't a period of teenage rebellion, casting it all off for a while?
I think once I cycled home from youth group without my lights on.
Oh,
you
rebel.
Yeah, but perhaps it's still to come. Don't they? Well, but there was a sort of thing because certainly my mother was born in Northern Ireland and quite a strict brethren background.
Right.
And the idea of me finding work in rooms next to pubs was quite difficult for her.
Okay.
To be fair, they let us go and do our own thing, and I think she was a bit worried, maybe justifiably. I don't know. So, sometimes you see singers interviewed, and they say, "I learnt to sing in the church." Well, in a way, I learnt not to do stand up in the church, but I learnt how to stand up.
Yeah.
And do sketches and read stuff and do youth group concerts and all that. So I sort of feel like it gave me a boost.
And I've always felt there is some overlap between a really good preacher and a really good stand-up comedian.
Yes, that's true. Although I was thinking about that the other day, because sometimes vicars or church leaders say to me, how could I make my sermons a bit more humorous? Humorous.
Give me a gag about Matthew.
Yeah, exactly. But I think they're two different things. They look very similar. They look, like a person addressing an audience and trying to communicate something. But church leader is supposed to bring God to people, God's voice in some way. That's what they're supposed to. And if they can get as a byproduct, they can make them laugh. That's great. Comedians, it's the other way around.
Right.
You're employed to make people laugh. That's your job to do that. And if I could make people think something profound as a byproduct, that would be great.
Right.
And sometimes I think what preachers want to do is to stamp on a joke or two. And the danger of that is that people only really remember the joke.
Sure, yeah.
And it wasn't actually connected to what they were talking about.
Yeah.
So you've made people laugh, you've engaged them, but you've actually made it worse. Because I think probably as someone trying to bring God to people, you need to be most of all authentic.
Don't try and be a stand-up comedian if that's not your calling.
Exactly. If you're not a funny person.
Right.
Why should, I've seen plenty of jokes murdered. And you need to be authentic because people, the thing you're talking about is not an act. It should not be an act.
Yeah.
That is the one thing it shouldn't be. So try not to have one.
Yeah. Are there ways in which it's really interesting you said how church sort of, I've heard James Acaster say the same thing, where he sort of did a lot in church and it sort of led him into what he does now, and he's amazing at it. But are there ways where that has happened in reverse? Are there ways in which your comedy journey has informed or shed light on certain parts of Christianity, or, does it work the other way as well?
Just to say, James was my support act in 2011-12, so I know him quite well, and we've talked a lot.
Could you get him on the Re-Enchanting podcast? Do you reckon?
Well, I can see why you might not like what he says, but does my comedy inform my faith? Is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Clive James once said that, Clive James, the writer and broadcaster, yes, that comedy is the truth dancing. And I have enjoyed being part of a community, the comedy community, let's call them, performers and writers and producers and all, who play with the truth. And there's something about mixing with that lot. They see through stuff. And that, even religious stuff, which I can't really get around. They will say things about church or the way so-and-so acts, who is a Christian, that they tend to nail stuff. And I like being part of that industry. It keeps you on your toes. But I quite like to try and take some of that into church sometimes. The telling it how it is. As opposed to everyone being very, very nice all the time. And okay, I'm it's my job and I have to do it, but a bit more authenticity in church. A lot of the sermons I remember, or things people have stood up and said, have been painfully honest. And sometimes when you're with performers, the best show is the ones where they're horribly honest.
Yes.
And it's that truth dancing thing that everyone recognizes. Because it's, instead of, I don't think, Ricky Gervais and co are the atheists who are preaching to the converted. Because most people in the room don't believe in God. But I think there is a place for that in church as well. When someone gets up and talks about depression, or what they really feel about something, it cuts through. And I think comedy can do that. However, sometimes I'm asked to go and do church stuff, which we may be coming on to. And the way it's presented is, can you come in the first half, can you do your thing? And in the second half, would interview you about your real faith.
Okay.
Right? Now, I always feel slightly awkward about doing that. It's a big gear change for me to do. But sometimes I think about it in terms of art. If it's good, deconstructs things. But quite often Christianity wants to construct it all again. Because art, if it's good, not my acts especially, but painting, opens up a mystery. Quite often, especially in evangelical churches, they want me to, how did you become a Christian? What words did you use? What would you say to other people in the room?
Give us the package, basically.
The formula. Give us the secret formula, and so other people can do it. And I've said, although I'm not preaching in the first half, I go, well, it's not that straightforward. There's a big mystery element to it, and people come by different routes. And the main message to people is what people are like rather than what they're saying.
Yeah.
You know, you can't formularize the whole thing.
Is it very different doing a gig for a set of Christians to, I don't know, the comedy club or wherever?
Yes and no. It depends on the room. Quite often you're in a church and all the laughter goes straight up and it's much harder work. And sometimes what happens is it's a semi-evangelistic thing.
Yeah.
And they've invited the kids from the local estate who are running around, and it's quite difficult to, because in a club
people are there for the comedy. Yeah.
People are there for, and you don't want to mess up their evangelism by being rude to them. So they're full of complications. And also often a Christian audience, especially if they've invited people in from the outside, is a real mixture. It's not a normal audience.
No.
It's, you might have babies crying or people who've never been in church or theatre before. And it's quite hard to deal with all that, or they take you literally about stuff you're saying. So
classic Christians.
Yeah.
Taking things literally.
Who'd have thought? And also the biggest part is that I don't feel I've got a message for the church.
Right.
So if I have a message and I don't have a literal message of words, it's who I am in the whole world. Sorry, and while I remember, is also Christians have a thing about, well, we're not into celebrity because that's part of the culture. Oh, so-and-so has become a Christian. Get him to our meeting. We've got one, ladies and gentlemen. And that sort of annoys me a bit.
Yes.
And he will be running to speaking at alpha meetings and men's breakfasts forever and ever and ever.
On podcasts and all.
Yeah, terrible, isn't it? When you try and get these celebrities like Frank Skinner, for instance, to come on your podcast. Speaking of which, Frank, as I said, was with us in season 2. And he said something that I disagreed with him about. He didn't think the Bible was actually that funny. And I said, I think that if you kind of got into the culture and behind the language, you'd probably find Jesus was actually telling quite funny stories. I don't know what can you resolve this one for us?
No, but I think if you see comedy that was made 20 years ago, it looks dated.
Yes.
So to go back 2,000 years, and especially because the words are so familiar to anyone who goes to church or is in Western society, actually, it's really hard to see them afresh. So I think actually the onus today is more on Christian artists and artists in general to take down the Lego bricks and to rebuild them in a way that people can understand them now, but using the same bricks, not making up their own bricks.
Okay.
And that's difficult to do, but it's like when someone preaches a sermon, often the bit you wake up with is when they start to talk about their own life or an example of what's happening in this passage in the Bible today. Yeah. It happened, hopefully not in another country that we can't prove. It happened down the road. Yeah. You know, and you go, oh, that was great when he told the story about so-and-so, even though that wasn't a Bible story technically, but it was the same. So it's up to filmmakers and painters and stuff. I mean, I suppose the most obvious is Lord of the Rings or something where, you know, it's good versus bad and it's all straightforward. But you could argue that a lot of Christian messages are in stuff. And also things like The Chosen, you know, that thing. The bits we know already, we go, yeah. Well, I go, yeah, I know that. But what's interesting then is there was a scene I saw, Jesus playing with children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where they kind of fill in some of the gaps.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not the Bible, but it's a pretty good guess.
Yes. Yeah.
That he was like that, and it just opens it up, and it's in the same spirit.
Yes.
In every way. And that's what we have the potential to do, as long as we don't get locked down on the words.
I think that's it. For me, it's sort of having the freedom. Yes, Jesus used shepherds and widows and whatever. Those were the people and the professions around him that he would use to illustrate his stories. And sometimes we just stick to those ourselves, even though none of us have ever met a shepherd.
Sure.
So speak for yourself.
I know you. That's very true. You're from the Green Hills of Wales, but in a sense, you would think that might give us license to just sort of let's give this story a contemporary, a sense of what's that equivalent in. Is it the person serving you tea down the cafe or whatever? Absolutely,
because it's not the Bible we're worshipping. Hopefully it's God who wrote the Bible, and that Jesus is the Word of God. And it's the spirit of what's behind it that could even guide you into writing and doing stuff. Nothing's going to be perfect, because that was the other thing I was thinking, is it would be another miracle if Jesus spoke the parables completely formed. Because I know about writing processes, and I imagine him going around saying the same ones again, and maybe
and refining them as he goes.
And I know disciples didn't always get the parables, but maybe once they did, do you think the ending was better this time? Or workshopping the thing. So, you left out the bit about the woman who, know.
Yeah.
Because
and I think you can even, if you read the Gospels, you will find slight variations in the way it's told in Mark versus Matthew and Luke and so on. So, and as I understand it, you're the scholar on this, Belle, but it's likely that these were stories and sayings that were told again and again, which made them so memorable that they ended up in this form in the Gospels.
Yeah, storytelling was an art form that was taken much more seriously, and memory, the memorializing of storytelling was they had it down to a fine art. It was a science. I never thought of that, because another scene in The Chosen is when Jesus is this is not sponsored by The Chosen, by the way, is when Jesus is giving this Sermon on the Mount, and he's got one of his disciples, I think it's Matthew, and he's like recounting it from his sort of scroll or whatever, as if like they've been in this process of working this incredible sermon out, and they're kind of like, he nailed it. Yeah, he nailed that line. He really got that point across. And that was one of my favourite scenes, because I'd never thought of it like that.
Yeah. I'm sure that's more likely.
So much more likely, and really beautiful, really powerful that they happened that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Laughter is what we're talking about re-enchanting today. Do you think sort of laughter has some sort of divine quality to it?
I would say not all laughter is good.
Right.
In that I've heard bullying laughter, I've heard cynical laughter. Sometimes people speak of it as if it's all great. Yeah. It's just a reaction. And depends what's in the soul, in what way you're going to react. But joy, if that comes out in laughter, that's a great thing. And there's a weird miracle that goes on, because we go through life. There are a lot of hard things in life, a lot of disappointments, a lot of difficult things to deal with. And sometimes I'm conscious that jokes that I and others say get a bigger laugh than the joke. It's like there's a healing process going on, that people let out all that tension that's built up, and we're acting as an air brick of some kind to health. Now, I wonder, France and Italy don't have the same cabaret system, or they have comedy, but it's slightly different. I wonder if English people, British people, are slightly more passive-aggressive, and they build it all up, and they need an excuse, to let it all out. And it comes in different ways. It's like if even something like Michael McIntyre saying, you know what it's like when you've got a drawer full of stuff or whatever. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But I hadn't been able to find the words. I'd never noticed that. But I'm laughing because it resonates. Yeah. and that there's a joy in that of going, and it joins people together because the room's laughing. Go, none of us had talked about that before, but it's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you can somehow stumble over those things as a performer and share them with everyone, that can give a healthy kind of joy. I mean, the sort of joy that Tim or I or other one-liners give, if we do, is more a case of daft, sort of silly cartoons, a bit like playful, childish cartoons that some people resonate with in a different way.
Yeah.
And would make you, next time you see the word Irish, go, you'd remember that joke, or you'd see it in a different way. But it's a deconstructing of the things we are familiar with.
I suppose it makes me think, yes, the laugh, when someone laughs, it's almost an involuntary response, right? But as you say, the subject matter, you might laugh and then stop yourself because you think, oh, do I want to laugh at that? But so the question is sort of what I think of, perhaps those quote unquote edgy comedians, the Dave Chappelle's and maybe Ricky Gervais when he's banging on about religion or whatever. There's a sense in which there's a kind of almost nervous laughter that someone might feel. And is that okay? Is that kind of what are your feelings on the ones who kind of push the envelope in that kind of way when it comes to what they're trying to make their audience laugh at?
Well, it's difficult to put them all into one bracket because, and it depends on the joke.
Yeah.
And what a comedian will always say all down the decades is it's context.
Mm-hmm.
The trouble with the social media thing, formerly known as Twitter, is that it doesn't do tone.
Right.
You just have a sentence there, and the Daily Mail will show it to someone and go, "Isn't this terrible?" But you've got to be there.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for Christians or other people to pick up on something someone said and not know the context. Now, having said that, the context might not help you. It might be just as is. And sometimes I think it's deliberately transgressive to say the naughty thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we said the naughty thing. But I've seen some pretty nasty things said that wouldn't look nasty written down.
Right.
And conversely, I've heard some things that if you wrote them down would look pretty bad. But they were said in such a way with such a twinkle in the eye that you knew that the person didn't really mean it.
Right.
And was just saying it just to get a...
Or that someone's adopting a character sometimes. Where you're meant to understand this is ridiculous.
Yes.
But if you simply took it out of context, it could easily make a Daily Mail headline.
Absolutely.
And that's the problem with comedy, isn't it? It's so much you have to be in the moment to understand what's actually being conveyed in that sense.
Yes, and we're doing this thing at the moment where people are going back through all social media and stuff. And did you see that thing that Jimmy Carr was interviewed and said, do you think you'll do a tweet in the end that will get you cancelled? Right. Well, I've probably already done it.
Yeah.
Because, people are going through your back catalogue.
Is it becoming harder in that sense to do comedy in a slightly more arguably censorious social media age?
Yes and no. In that when I started about 10, 15 years before, it was perfectly acceptable to do Irish jokes and racist jokes and sexist jokes. And once alternative comedy came along, those things, in theory at least, were moved out. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anyone looking back would go, no, we need the Irish jokes back. I don't. Well, given that I said the word Irish anyway, different sort of joke. So things change. Society changes. What people will accept. And I was saying earlier, even looking back at Mock the Week 10 years ago, 7 white guys looks wrong now.
Right.
And at the time there was some, why should we change anything?
Yeah.
I think, well, now we accept that.
Yeah.
So some of the things that are happening are good. Like I saw, this doesn't happen to me very often. I tried out some stuff in a club where everyone was under 30, basically. And someone did their act and it was fine. It was a young girl. And then she spoke about mental health for 5 minutes towards the end of her act. That was fine. Got a massive round of applause at the end. Good for her. We talk about mental health now. if that had happened when I started, you would have lasted 20 seconds.
Wow. Interesting.
Because no one would have heard it. Now, are we saying that that's bad as well? There was something about the alternative circuit that was quite political, and yes, there was no sexism and no racism, but it was quite brutal at the same time.
Cynical almost.
So there's an edge both ways. And I mean, I think in the end, cancelling will eat itself, because, you know, how far back, you know, we're getting shorter and shorter gaps to how far back we go now. And in the end, it will be unworkable. I do think, though, that you've got to let people say what they think, or what they want to say. And by all means, disagree with it. But you'll just force them underground if you don't let them say it. Yeah.
Forgive my ignorance, but when you said the alternative comedy circuit, what kind of acts was that at the time?
Well, it depends where it begins in the 80s. This is before my time.
Yeah.
Doing it. And it was a sort of reaction to the mainstream entertainment industry, which was very bow tie and my wife sort of jokes. And it was quite political in that it was mixed up with the miners' strike. Sort of
Ben Elton type of stuff.
Ben Elton, kind of Thatcher out.
Yeah.
Quite political.
Okay.
Alexi Sale. That
very
sort of
sweary.
Stuff.
Yeah.
And eventually the alternative bit was dropped. And it just became comedy as those guys got older.
That became the mainstream almost.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that was where the young people were. And so as the young people became older people, middle-aged people, and had money to go and watch people on tour, so it was the mainstream.
Yeah. Do you think we're kind of evolving into a new stage now? What is it?
Potentially. We need some kids to go away and become the alternative again.
Right.
And what's interesting, people like Barry Cryer and Bob Monkhouse, when we came in, I was sort of at the very end of alternative comedy, they were really encouraging and took the view that funny is funny. However, there were others who were like, this isn't funny. I don't get this. This doesn't, you know. So I think they were scared about losing work, apart from anything. But I want to try and be one of the good guys, if you like, and say, come on in, it's just funny's funny.
Yeah.
I think that's quite important because, for instance, social media has changed a lot of things. So there are actually a lot of Instagrammers coming on comedy bills now.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it's tempting, you know, because they bring their own audience as well. So the promoter's really happy.
Of course, yeah.
And we've never heard of them. And yet hundreds of people have come to see them.
Yeah.
And they may even have a bit in their act. Do you remember when I did this photo?
Right.
My mum was in the background. They go, yeah, everybody. Is this comedy? What's gone wrong? But it's not illegitimate if all those people like it.
Yeah.
And it would be wrong and churlish to go, no, go back to my jokes. You know, sometimes I meet someone and say they're not laughing at my jokes, as if the audience should laugh at your jokes. You need to write some new jokes. Or just move with the times, otherwise you become a dinosaur.
Are there any young comedians who excite you in that regard now?
I'm slightly out of the loop of the circuit. So, I mean, James Acaster we talked about. I would say he's broken through now, and he speaks for that generation, him and some others. In fact, Nish Kumar was my other support act.
Oh, he's great. Well, we thank you for Nish Kumar and James Acaster.
Well, I'm not sure
you can take all the credit.
No, I'm not taking the blame either. But it's great to see new people break through with their own voice. That's the thing. Sometimes people break through and you go, well, I've sort of heard that voice before. But James, you know, has his James Acaster voice. Yeah.
Those are the two comedians as well who have very explicitly hit back at the likes of Ricky Gervais for some of his jokes, which is interesting. And I think maybe comedy it has the power to hurt people in a particular way. One, because it's quite a unique opportunity. Where else do you get to tell the truth dancing? Like, that's a privilege. But I think also so much of comedy is about belonging. And, you know, you kind of touched on it with the Michael McIntyre references, is what happens is there's comedy in our shared experiences, which we've been tricked into thinking are mundane and individualistic. And there's not much in common with any of us. And we're all just kind of bumping into each other. There's nothing that binds us. And comedy just does away with that. And it also does away with it in the room. It creates we belong to this room, we belong to this night, you know, we belong to the comedian and the comedian to us. And then all of a sudden, a group is excluded from that. But not you. Because the joke is actually at your expense. So actually now we're going to laugh at you, and any feeling of belonging you walked in with, consider it gone. Do you think that that's sort of why people get so... I don't think het-ups are weird, upset, genuinely hurt by, you know, sort of certain comedians?
Yes, I mean, it depends who we're talking about, because some people deliberately wind up, you know, they go out to say the most offensive things deliberately, and that's on the ticket.
Yeah,
right.
Okay.
That's kind of the act.
Yeah. For people then to take offence, go, well, what you expected?
Why did you go?
Yeah.
Sure.
Don't go to the Book of Mormon if you don't want the Book of Mormon, kind of thing.
Yes,
yeah.
I thought it was great though. But yes, if they pick on a minority, but again, that's the context thing. Sometimes it's important to talk about something and even your fears about it, but you can do it in such a way that isn't bullying.
Yeah.
And it's quite hard unless you're in the... Well, to be honest, one audience member can take something one way and another one can take it another way. And but jokes previously that I've stopped doing because certain members of the audience took it the wrong way. It's hard to say without explaining what it is. I mean, you can cut this out if you want. But I used to have a joke. Tricky, isn't it? If you're in a mosque and everyone's praying and you really enjoy leapfrog.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Which worked really well until I did somewhere, probably Essex, and someone shouted, "Yeah, tell them."
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Go, oh no.
Okay.
That wasn't the
that's
joke.
That's not.
No,
how it's
that's
meant
not
to
what I
be.
meant.
Yeah.
It's just about, forget it.
Right.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're wondering whether to continue with it just because there was an idiot.
Right.
And it's quite hard to work out sometimes. You just go with the majority, or now this is too...
As you say, it's a kind of... It is so, in a sense, subjective, contextual. Comedy kind of, you might think, it's just about making people laugh, but everyone sort of has their filter and their kind of limit, or the thing that for them is...
Sure.
I mean, they often say, don't they, that ultimately it's about punching up rather than punching down. Do you agree with that kind of way of defining?
Yeah, generally, but there's a grey area in between that some people think, well, maybe it's how tall they are, in terms of what's punching up and what's punching down. Is they're punching sideways, you know?
Yeah.
It depends, because minorities, if you like, call them that, sort of on the way up and on the way down through the news.
Who's to be the judge of who's above and who's below?
So that's where I'm a bit desensitized. But I would say, what was the tone of that? Was there a nastiness to that? I don't know. So, but I would give the comedian the benefit of the doubt, you see, because being part of that union.
Because you can see the inner workings and... You know, they're going to be asked, these are just words. What is this?
Basically, that's all it is.
Oh, well, it has been such a joy.
Thank you.
Such a joy to chat to you. And we could chat for another hour about this, I think.
We could. If people want to catch you, where are you going to be touring?
I will be doing a tour from September, a show called Milton. And...
Milton, like H-A Milton.
Exclamation mark Milton.
Quite similar to the Hamilton poster, to
I
be
see.
honest.
One of those things that you should see written down.
Gotta see it.
Are you there with a big standing on a star?
With a microphone.
Wonderful.
Ah,
so you completely ripped them off.
Yeah,
Great.
Basically, don't tell them. So that's from September. A radio series goes out in April, I think. Thanks a lot, Milton Jones.
Which is what season of that show?
Well,
is this
6, but we've done overall. That will be the 15th.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was thinking.
You're a long timer.
1998 started.
There you
doing
go.
radio.
Cool. Do you feel like you'll still be telling jokes, sort of, when they put you in the coffin?
Possibly, yes. I think it becomes an obsession after a while. Yeah, probably. I need to work out something for my gravestone as well. That would be
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Spike Milligan sort of. I told you I was ill. And that one.
And
Yeah.
presumably they'll need comedians in heaven,
Well,
won't be out of a job.
I guess so.
That's one of those existential
Yeah,
questions we're going down now.
yeah, it is. But I just think this is the nursery. And when we get to the secondary school or even get a proper job
Oh, yeah.
all round,
Yeah,
in heaven,
yeah.
it'll be on such a 4-dimensional scale that jokes will be like Lego.
Do you think we'll think, oh my gosh, we've never laughed before? Not like this.
I think everything will be up to 11.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
Thank you very much for re-enchanting laughter with us, Milton, on this edition of the show.
Yeah, I've loved every second of it.
Yeah, it's
Thank
been
you.
fantastic.
Thank you. No, pleasure.